Proceed.
All right. And we are live. Welcome, viewers. Sorry we're a little late. You should just be used to it at this point.
Oh, Rusty, you're an inspiration to us all.
Here,
I'll say I'm going to go start a paper route right now.
here we go. All right. Okay. So we're going to do things a little bit different. Oh, we didn't really talk about this, but I'm thinking we do the Milwaukee piece. We don't have a guest bumper this week, and we just go right into the after our moment of silence.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think that's perfect.
Okay. Does anybody else want to do it, or do you guys want me to do the middle?
You can do it. I'm going to mute my microphone so I don't cough all over the moment of silence. I'll see you on the other side, guys.
That'd be a good idea. All right, make sure I'm recording here. I'm recording on the tubes. All right. Here we go.
Oh, hold up before you get all serious. Hi,
Yeah,
Jeff McKinney. And hey, whoever else is watching. Ice Cramp. Hello.
Ice Cramp. We got
there was someone in the comments section last week. Ice Cramp.
Okay. All right. Let me start.
Okay.
Here we go.
And I do have to afterwards. I need to tell you about the way I saw somebody eating a sandwich today. Like it was insane.
Okay.
But that's later.
All right.
After you unmute your mic.
Okay.
All right. Maybe there's an after party tonight to talk about sandwiches or something. I don't know. All right. Can I go now, Jeff Solomon? Okay, good. Here we go. This week, we are recording the show on Wednesday. Shit. Never mind. Let's have a month in there. This week, we are recording the show on Wednesday, February 26, 2020. Today, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at the Molson Coors headquarters, a former employee killed at least 5 other employees before taking his own life. Obviously, this is still a developing story, and by the time you are hearing this, it's most likely that you know more about the story than we do at this time. So we're not going to go any more details than we already have. We know that the beer community of Milwaukee has deep, long, and strong roots. We can only imagine how devastating this can be to our friends in the area. Our deepest condolences go out to everyone in the community that has been affected by this senseless tragedy. We would like you to join us at this time in a moment of silence for those lost today.
At the sound of the tone, the official "We Like Drinking" time will be 5 o'clock. Commence consumption.
This week on episode 267 of the We Like Drinking podcast, we'll be discussing tariffs, great expectations, and we're chatting about all of the above with Jeff Millers. So crack open your beers, uncork that wine, and let's get drinking.
Drinking.
Grape expectations. The drinkening.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness, folks, we have got a literal truckload of things to talk about tonight. Unfortunately, they're all in port and can't get through to come out to us because of tariffs. But let's get into this and say cheers, my podcast drinking friends, and welcome to Happy Hour 267 of your favorite award-winning topical beer and wine and spirits education podcast focusing on fun.
Fun.
Yeah. Hi.
Everybody's a little off.
I'm over here fighting my mute button. Sorry.
Right. Your mute button's winning. You got a bloody nose.
So Farks, make sure you never miss another episode of our brand of drinking fun by visiting welikedrinking.com/subscribe. Let's do this. Like I said, we've got a lot to talk about, and a lot to drink. So let's find out who we have with us and what we're drinking. We're joined by our usual panel members. We have our California Sustainable Wine Growing Ambassador and recovering wine blogger, Jeff Solomon.
Hey, everybody.
We have our commercial brewer and snake wrangler, John Ruyek.
Hey, it's going to be 70 degrees this weekend in New Mexico. Guess what I'm going to go do?
Brew some beer.
Well, Saturday, but Sunday.
I shoveled like 3 inches of snow today, so fuck off. And I'm your host and certified specialist of wine, Jeff Eccles. Now, our guest this week is the managing director at Grape Expectations, a wine importer, distributor, logistics firm, and retailer focusing on delivering handmade wine to the California, Oregon, and Washington state markets. He has a unique insider view of how the U.S. versus EU tariffs and tariff threats are affecting the wine world, and we're really interested to get to know more about that. So please help us welcome Jeff Miller. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you much. Good to be here.
Awesome to have you on the show. I got to say, I found some of your blogs, some of your YouTube channels, information, and I spent like half a day just pouring over it. So I'm so excited to have you on the show. People may not think this is going to be interesting, but trust me, it's going to be a fantastic discussion. So welcome to the show.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
You can find Grape Expectation on Instagram at GrapExWine. Subscribe to their blog at grapex.com/blog, or subscribe to their podcast, Grape, Unified and Unfined and Unfiltered, all on your preferred podcast catchers. All right. Let's find out what everybody's drinking. John Ruyek, what's in your glass?
I'm drinking some beer. I'm drinking some Arrogant Bastard.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. You're not worthy for that, dude.
I'm not.
What
old school craft.
You know what's funny?
I
remember a long time ago. So Stone was moving away from their original pale ale to their pale ale 2.0. And we had this conversation about what is their flagship beer, because Stone thought it was their pale ale. And we're like, no. And we all agreed that their flagship beer was Arrogant Bastard. And I can't tell you the last time I've ever had one, and I don't even see it anymore.
Nope.
So the real question is, what is Stone's flagship beer?
It is Arrogant Bastard, but I think they're trending towards those. This is, I think when I think about this, and we'll talk about this in just a second, but I think they're going towards those more fruit forward IPAs. Not traditional West Coast IPAs, which is more along the lines of what Arrogant Bastard is. But when I think about Arrogant Bastard, Eccles, you got to think back to, this is a collaboration brew I did with Myers. We did an Arrogant Bastard clone and took it to a hockey tournament in Breckenridge.
Yeah.
And this is kind of sort of the beginning of very dark path I've gone down in the last 10 years. Right?
That's the truth. That is the truth. Jeff Solomon.
Well, we're recording on the 26th. This comes out on the 28th of February, which 3 out of 4 years, that's the last day of February, but it's a leap year, y'all. Remix. So tomorrow is that extra day, the most rare of days, February 29th, which caps off the end of Rare Disease Month. February 29th is Rare Disease Day. Rare diseases impact, and here's the irony, they impact 30 million Americans. So it's not that rare to have a rare disease. It's just they're each individually rare. But I've been kind of highlighting rare things throughout this month, and I hope y'all are trying to search out something rare. Here's the rare thing that I am having today. It's a Viognier that I actually like. This is the Aver Family Vineyards, and I say their name a lot. They're out of Gilroy, California. This is their Benevolent 2018 Viognier, sourced from Katie's Corner Vineyard in the Russian River Valley. This is 14.5% alcohol, just beautiful, cool climate fruit, a whole lot of acid. There's some nice like floral and honey notes on this. And it's, sometimes I see people try to over oak some Viognier, and this is not that, but it's got just a kiss to help this ride and this journey through your palate. I'm loving this thing.
Awesome. We drank some Sangiovese a handful of weeks ago, and I had the Rosso di Montalcino. I re-poured that when I was all done. So I popped that re-pour off, and I am getting to enjoy this delicious Sangiovese all over again.
Nice.
So jealous. Yeah. Awesome. Jeff Miller, what's in your glass tonight?
So I've got some Champagne Moutarde bitch vines, aka Vins Chiens, depending on your French pronunciation.
Way to bury.
And I don't know if you can hear me right now. Is this coming through?
Yeah, you're coming through. You're coming through. We are all extremely jealous and are all dumping our
Sweet.
glasses out.
No.
I wish you were here. No, this is cool. Do you guys know Moutarde? Are you familiar with Moutarde?
Mm-hmm. A little bit.
Yeah. So, yeah, really interesting family producer down in the Côte d'Ivoire. So it's kind of a underdog appellation within Champagne. So it's the southeastern kind of outer reach of Champagne. It's Pinot Noir country. So this, they call it bean chiens or bitch vines because they're a bitch to work. They're on a steep slope. Super good. It's put together with a staple. So it's the old school. I don't know if you can see this, but it's the old staple and cork. So you pop it out with a key.
Oh, wow.
Cool. But we were down there and they had this series. There's 5 different single vineyard champagnes that they're doing. And we basically just bought everything that they had. And yeah, it's good stuff. So
that's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, the world of an importer. You just show up and you're like, yeah, I'll just take it all.
Well, it's easy when there's not much, right? It's like,
yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're an importer and you're not drinking champagne a couple nights a week, then you're doing it wrong because, you should.
We've made terrible life choices, Jeff Solomon.
What are we doing on this podcast, Eccles? The problem is we look at the numbers. It's all the freeloaders. We need more patrons. It's welikeDrinking.com/pledge. You can't give us $1 a month. What's your problem? We're trying to get some champagne.
I guess I need to send you guys some champagne, huh?
Yes.
We won't say yes. No. We're not too proud to say no. Hey, can I take just a second to say congratulations to 2020 CD3. Welcome to the family, even if it's only temporary.
Okay.
You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?
I don't.
We have a temporary new moon. Its name is 2020 CD3. It's about the size of a Toyota Camry, and it's expected to exit Earth's orbit in a couple of months.
That is so cool. So is its orbit as so it must be going faster than our moon?
It's an elliptical orbit that takes it out past the moon and goes around the Earth about once every 48 days.
Wow. That is so cool. I'm gonna get out my little like weird stargazer app and see if I can catch it. Like, right. How sometimes like on just the right night, you can look up when the International Space Station's gonna fly across the sky, and you just you point and you watch it, and you're like, whoa,
things hauling.
There's people on that.
That's very cool.
They're baking cookies.
So we're like the antithesis of Tatooine with its 2 suns.
There you go.
Okay.
All right. That didn't take long for us to go off the rails. But what else should we expect?
It has been 43 minutes since we all signed on.
This is true. All right, but let's get back to it. Let's refocus. Let's dial it in and get to
wine, beer, spirit, or pop culture reference. Folks, most of you know how this works. If you don't, I'm going to ask our panel, the 3 Jeffs, I'm going to give them a term. and I'm going to spell it because someone's going to ask me to spell it, and they're going to try to guess whether it's a wine term, a beer term, a spirit term, or some sort of weird pop culture reference. All right. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Ready.
I was born ready.
Wait a minute. Deja vu. All right. This week's term is Vasnisic.
Vasnisic.
How do you spell that?
Vasnisic.
How do you spell that, John Ruyak?
Kvasnicich. Vasnisic.
Vasnisic.
And so this could be pop culture, beer, wine, or spirits?
A spirit, yep.
In
All
anything.
right.
So really, this could be anything on Earth.
It could be anything on the planet.
Okay. Here's what I know. Here's what I know.
I didn't ask you to go first, Solomon.
I knew you were going to say
So
Jeff.
therefore,
gets to
I'm
go
going
first.
to go to Jeff Eccles.
Oh, you
Eccles.
Jeff Eccles.
Vasnisic.
See what
All right.
happens when you jump in line? You have to go to the end of the line.
Son of a biscuit.
This I have a feeling that you were tempting us when you brought up our new moon. I just have a feeling that's where this is coming from. So I'm going to say this is a pop culture reference, and this is going to be the name of the person that discovered this new 2020 moon.
All right. That's a good guess. Mr. Jeff Miller, what do you think?
Well,
Vasnisic.
I like the angle of the kind of astronomy with it being the whole Kvass thing, because I get Russia out of that. And, moon, space, Russian scientists, that's pretty smart. But I don't know. It's also a beer show, and you've got Kvass, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of going to go with beer, because I don't know exactly what, you got Kvass, right? So stuff you go to like all those old Soviet countries, and they've got like the truck sitting there with they used to have just like the one cup that was on a chain, and you'd like, it's like communion in church, right? You'd like go up, you give them like 5 Soviet ruble cents or whatever, and they'd give it from the spigot, you'd sip it, you give them your money, and then they'd wipe it, and then next guy up.
That sounds totally clean.
So maybe Kvasnisic would be like the little cup, because it's alcoholic. It's beer. It's like a super low alcohol beer, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with beer. And if we have to say what it is, I'm going to say it's that.
All right.
It's like the guy that serves the Kvass from the truck.
I like it. Or it's the disease that you get from drinking.
That's even better. I'm a little itchy down there. I think I got some Kvasnisic.
Why does it burn when I drink this beer? Okay.
I met a girl at the Kvass truck.
Oh, she was a questionable. Okay, Solomon, you're up.
Here's 2 things I know about John Ruyak. Number 1, he's Croatian, I think. Number 2, his favorite meal is chicken paprikash. And number 3, anytime there's a CH in a word, it's Croatian.
Oh, yeah.
Croatians invented chess. They invented checkers. Kvasnisic. And so I'm going to say, because we have a guest on who's in the wine industry, who's an importer, I think John Ruyak was just trying to get like super deep and like, I'm going to come up with a wine that even this like amazing importer's never heard of before. Kvasnisic it's not a grape, but it's actually the name of a producer in Croatia that makes wine. Yeah.
So
Funny thing though, you go to the
I think you're right. No, for real, because in our wine stores we had a guy that was in one of our wine stores, and he'd buy all this Croatian wine.
Yeah.
And that sounds right. There's a bottle that says, it's in red, and it says something, it's like Kavachna Sich, like C, it's IC. Is this ISCH, or is it end in a C?
It's CH.
CH.
Huh.
But
I don't
that's
know.
the thing. There's like some transliteration that goes on too. Like in a sense that, like, you know, you can spell Hanukkah however you want and you're right. It's
I
kind
think
of
you're
like
on
that.
it. Yeah, you're
And then,
right.
and then on
You're
top
on
of
it.
that, when you go to the tasting room at Kavasna Siege, here's what's so like serendipitous is that it's one like 2-ounce tasting glass on a chain and everybody shares
Yes.
And they have a window that always shows, that always displays the moon. It's amazing.
it. Yes.
All right.
Which moon?
Yeah, exactly.
RU-284, that one.
This is a spell-binding episode of
All right.
WB.
I feel like is Neil deGrasse Tyson writing these notes? What's going on here?
All right.
John.
Are you ready for the big reveal?
Yes.
Okay, you're not going to get it right just now because I got to tell you a short little story.
Oh,
So I don't know. Can you read this? Is it backwards? It's backwards.
No,
isn't
it's
it?
No,
So
we can see it.
that-
Yeah.
Do you
that's
see it?
so Croatian. That's straight
Okay.
up Croatian.
It says Veshno Yetuor Vasnisic. And we got this from BSI, which is a Brewery Science Institute up in Woodland Park, Colorado, not more than 20 miles away from Jack Eccles' house. And what do they make at the Brewery Science Institute there, Mr. Eccles?
I believe they make hops, don't they?
They propagate yeast.
Yeah, yeast.
Vasnisic is Czech for yeast. And
Wow.
Zeshno Yetuov Vasnisic means it's all about the yeast. It's a beer term. Miller wins.
Oh no!
Nice.
I think wine. I think can be a.
I think everything, all distilled spirits.
I think what it isn't is anything to do with a fucking moon. So I think the other Jeffs win this one. What is it, John?
Vasnisic. And I actually had to learn how to pronounce it by pressing a little the speaker button on my English to Czech translation app.
A lot, I imagine.
Yeah,
That was a good one, John. Well
Yeah.
okay.
I like that one.
That was a good one. Okay, let's get into this interview. Let's do this, Jeff Miller. So first off, before we get into all the tariff stuff, we know that you work for Grape Expectations or GrapEx or whatever you want to call it, and that you're a wine importer, distributor, retailer, all the things, serving the Western coastal states. But can you give us like a high level rundown of what you do for them? And actually, what exactly a wine importer does, and, maybe a little information about your catalog.
Sure. So I came over here about 2 years ago, and it was the first company that I ever worked for in my professional life out of university when I was in my early 20s. Started out as a sales rep for them up in northern Washington State. Ended up leaving to go over to the importer side. Ironically, it's funny you bring up Czech beer. I originally, to start all this whole alcohol thing, I wanted to bring Gambrinus beer from Prague back to the U.S. and make it a thing. That was like the dream as like a 22-year-old kid. And so I remember when you had classified ads, right? You go to the classifieds.
Yes.
There was a wine. I was looking for a job selling beer, and there was one for wine. So I thought, I'll pick that one. And then tying in this, it all ties. It's funny. I was working at for a Croatian seafood company, so it all ties into Kvasac. I remember this guy calls, and I get off the canning line or whatever and take the call, and ended up working for this wine distribution importation company called Grape Expectations, and it was really fun. Ended up, like I said, leaving to go run national sales for a Latin American importer called Elixir. I was there for about a dozen years, and the opportunity came up to come back to Grape to lead the company in what's kind of a new generation of the company. Most of the people that started the company had retired or were getting ready to retire. The founder of the company really tragically passed away kind of unexpectedly. And I came in and kind of helped to start this a new era in our company. So what we did, we shifted what we were doing a bit in terms of how we approached ourselves, how we approached the market. We became a much more content-driven company, and we expanded our reach as an importer outside of our West Coast states. So we'd always imported most of the wine that we sold, but we never made that available to other states, which was kind of an odd thing. Generally, if you're importing wine, you'll make it available outside. And so on day one, we expanded that and we started selling our imports into most other states. So we went kind of from 0 to 60 really fast. We opened up about 35, 40 states in that first year. It's one of those things where there were amazing wineries we'd represented for a long time. We'd always sold really large volumes of them on the West Coast, and many of these people just weren't in other states. So it was one of those things, if you called up, if you made some phone calls, people were very happy to jump on those. And the philosophy was always has been at Grape to provide just crazy value, to not have, some of the frills that other wine importers will have, and keep the cost lean and come into the market with just, amazing price points for what you're getting. That's always been what we've been known for. So the content element of that played in where, before in the old days, as a wine importer, you had to spend a lot of money on people going out and talking to reps in person, doing what you call ride lists. You get in cars and you talk to people. But the thinking here was, hey, we've never done any of that. It's really, really easy to publish high quality content. I mean, you have to be content oriented, and you have to have people on the team that like to do that and are good at it. And it's not easy to maybe create the content, but it's not expensive. And so if you have the right people, you can create great content. You can have, we have our podcast. We have, we do a bit of YouTube stuff. We do a lot on our website, on our blog, etc. And so the thinking was, if we create all that content, all these salespeople in outside states that we're not in, that would work with us as an importer, would have all the information they need on the wine. We wouldn't need to hire an army of reps to go out, which would save about, if the margin of an importer is 30%, let's say the gross margin, and 10, 15% of that pays for all these salespeople that are traveling out, taking flights and getting in cars with reps. You can get rid of that, have a much leaner margin, right? You could be more 10, 15, sometimes even as low as 5%, and end up at a really, really competitive place for everybody, from the distributor to the retailer to the restaurant down to the consumer. So without being too long-winded, we have our import portfolio, and that's what that is. So we serve ourselves as a distributor and we sell into all these other states. Then we have our distribution companies. So we have 3 distribution companies, one in California, one in Oregon, one in Washington. And so that's kind of self-explanatory if you're in the business listening to this. We're a distributor. We carry about 1,500 wines. Most of those we import ourselves, but we do work with other importers to a small extent, more agencies than importers. And then we represent some really great domestic producers as well. So then the third business that we have it's a 3PL logistics business. So the idea there is just providing these compressed margin solutions to really anybody in the business. It's a very, very creative business. This was another big change that we made 2 years ago, and it's really kind of developing right now. I saw a huge opportunity in the market with all this noise that we see. Tariffs are a good example, and we'll get into that, or just the way the market's going with some of the larger chains like Total Wine, let's say, who has come to many of these states with a more compressed margin model. You have independent retailers and other chains, other importers and wineries that want to compete with that. And there are very few people in the market in individual states that have the licensing that you need to operate legally, who are willing to get creative and solve those problems. So we help a lot of great chains, a lot of great independents, and great wineries and importers with these kind of smart compressed margin routes to market. And we can talk about that when we get into kind of some of the math behind tariffs, because it's super relevant when you get a situation where you have a sudden, 25% tariff that's slapped through the channel. And then the last of the 4 arms that we have is our retail arm. So we've owned and operated retail stores in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 20 years now. So 3 stores called Vino in East Bay, and then 1 called Odd Lots. So you probably have some listeners, I'm sure your Northern California listeners will be familiar with those stores. There's good neighborhood wine shops. The focus obviously is wine that we import ourselves. We can provide great value there. And it's been really fun lately to leverage, now that we're creating a lot of content, to kind of leverage the content we've created as an import company, and it's just right there. And then we have these retail stores that can use just really amazing content that's created by, there's a really nice kind of ecosystem of people here that helps with that. So yeah, that's kind of us in a nutshell.
That's amazing. You guys are busy.
We're busy. Yeah.
Wow, the way you're talking about like content kind of driving sales, you almost sound like the Gary Vaynerchuk of wine.
that would be cool. I don't know about that, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, content is important, right? I mean, it's super important. Yeah, I mean, he did an amazing job with content when he was doing the retail thing, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, he was the first guy to do anything on YouTube, and I think he was the first kind of Google search king too, right? Wasn't that his first step?
As far as wine goes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting. The content thing is super interesting, because I mean, when I was at Elixir, that's a really great Latin American importer. We had we had good content, but it wasn't super developed in terms of channels we used. So we had a website, and we wrote. I'm really passionate about just drilling down what are the points for any winery or wine that really just drive the message, right? Because there's so much fluff. I remember being at Grape the first time around, and these wineries would give us like a little packet, right? There'd be a little paper packet, and it would say, here at so-and-so winery, we love our vines. We tenderly love our vines, and our wines are complex. It's just all this fluff. There was nothing that was interesting. So at Elixir, what we did, we just drilled down the message. Why is this winery interesting? What's different? Why is this wine? Why do we have it? And with anything that's worthy of carrying, there's going to be, 3 or 4 good bullet points on each of those things. And so what I found was I'd go out to do these ride lists, and because the model of that company it's more of a traditional model where you imported wine and you had reps and you'd go and ride in cars with people. I found that the reps, especially the best reps, they would basically remember the whole bullet point block for every wine and winery when we went out. And so by the end, there was really no reason to go out and work the market, because they knew the message. So coming over here, it just kind of said, content is totally king. If you can create awesome content that the reps want to listen to, they're going to listen to it, they're going to remember it, and everything. It's kind of like this flywheel that rolls. So yeah, it's been really, really fun. It's the most fun part. There's a lot of, in the position I'm in, there's a lot of less fun stuff that I deal with, but the content thing is something that, it's easy to probably spend too much time on it, but it's fun, Yeah. It's really fun.
Absolutely. Amazing. Okay, so let's do a little bit on this tariff stuff here.
Cool.
So now we've talked about, the 25% tariff that we're sitting on right now with regards to Airbus. Obviously a big deal to importers like Grape Expectations, but also to all your business arms, right? That are impacted by the long list of items that made the list. So do you have any information on what's happening with the tariffs and what we can expect in, kind of both short and long-term?
Sure. Yeah. So there are two issues right now in the tariff world. You have this Boeing versus Airbus war that's gone on. I mean, I remember being in high school or university even, and that was a while. I mean, that was, 20 years ago, right? High school. And my dad worked for Boeing, and I remember him complaining about this when I was a kid. He would say, "Oh, these Airbus guys are all subsidized by the EU," and I kind of thought, well, I'm sure that the U.S. subsidizes Boeing too, right? It's just it's what countries do. And the World Trade Organization was created in '94 is kind of a new way to look at trade negotiations. We can geek out on some of the congressional stuff later if you want, but the idea with the WTO was that instead of these countries slapping unilateral tariffs on each other, which was really what started happening in the mid '70s, it's kind of a Cold War thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
This organization, the WTO, was created with the idea that trade would be more or less free, and if you subsidized, if you were a governmental agency and you subsidized local business, or you tried to tariff a non-local business or non-national business, that it would go to this court, and there was a court that was elected by all of the governments, I don't know if it was the G7 or G12, or basically all the large powers had a say in electing these judges. And so you would have situations, maybe you had the Japanese who would catch tuna, and then let's say there was another country that thought that their tuna fishing was environmentally unsafe, so that country would put up a tariff, and that case would go to the WTO, and they'd determine whether or not that was all kind of a smokescreen, and Portugal was that Japan was environmentally irresponsible only because Portugal wanted to protect their own pricing. So it worked pretty well. I mean, I remember being in university, and there were always protests about the WTO, but you kind of mature a little bit and see the real world and realize it was a system that worked fairly well. And so what happened with Boeing and Airbus, the US illegally subsidized Boeing, the EU illegally subsidized Airbus. That went on for at least a decade, if not a couple decades. And it was they were both officially caught, if you will, by the WTO, not a few years ago, but 10 years ago.
Right.
And there have been these two cases that have just lingered on forever. And the decisions, it was kind of dumb luck which decision would happen first, whether the WTO would rule the case against Boeing first, or whether they'd rule the case against Airbus first. And the case against Airbus and the EU ended up being the first ruling that came down. I think it was actually decided that there would be reparations, sometime over a year ago, but it takes forever for, the United States Trade Representative, which is the executive branch department that deals with all these trade related matters, to lay out, what their plan would be, and also for the WTO to lay out what is the value of all these subsidies that the U.S. can retaliate on. So the value was laid out, and then the U.S. TR came up with this kind of, if you look at it, it's kind of arbitrary, and it's political, right? It's meant to be kind of exciting, and it's meant to piss off, the other countries involved. And so they basically came up with a list of, cultural products that each country seemingly valued, right? You could say it was a little cruel if you read it face value, right? That it's kind of Italy. All right, let's go after Parmesan Reggiano cheese.
Mm-hmm.
France will go after wine, so on. I guess I take that back a bit on Italy. That's slightly separate. That was what they threatened later. But basically, if you look at these tariffs, it was Portugal. You had wool coats that they were threatening on this. It was pretty arbitrary. And so at the end of the day, the list of items, it's pages long to read.
Yeah, it is.
But at the end of the day, for us, it was wine that was non-sparkling, non-fortified, at 14% alcohol or lower, from the specific countries that had Airbus factories, which were France, Spain, Germany, and the United Kingdom. There were some interesting omissions if you dig into the politics of it. For example, you could ask, okay, well, why was there no sparkling wine in that list? And then you kind of look at, who connects with who. You had the largest shareholder in Moet Hennessy, who just opened up a Louis Vuitton purse factory in Texas under Trump's America First plan. So kind of interesting, right? That sparkling wine would be off the list. There were a lot of really interesting things there. Some people thought it was goofy how the wines that were targeted were 14 or below. The thinking was that the bureaucrats writing this kind of legislation, if you will, thought that all wine was below 14. So a lot of people thought it was a mistake, and that all wine, they'd figure it out, and then they just jack it up to all wine. Because it's really a weird thing, right? I mean,
Right.
14% is kind of right in the middle. So they basically killed the hipsters. So all the hipster wine was pretty much screwed. Right?
I was gonna say, all you with your like soft approaches to wine.
Totally.
Get some guts.
All
Drink
your
something that'll put your
totally.
hair on your chest.
all your Burgundy. You know, some of your Bordeaux might be safe.
Yeah, but a lot of the good Bordeaux
wines
was not.
with balance. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bordeaux is crazy. I mean, I was with the I was at this Union de Grand Cru de Bordeaux event in Seattle the other day, and I was with spent some time with the Bordeaux buyer for wine.com, and for him it's been just horrible because a lot of the great Bordeaux comes in, it's very balanced, and it comes in just below that level.
Okay.
And it's very international and price sensitive, so people will shuttle it around. You're talking first growth Bordeaux, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just derailed that channel for him. I mean, he's just kind of stuck. They can't really buy it because if they buy it with a tariff, their price is uncompetitive based on all the. With high-end Bordeaux, there's so much kind of backstock and people's cellars that gets resold, so it's really, really distorting there. But yeah, it's basically, Loire Valley was pretty screwed. Burgundy, Bordeaux, all the kind of cool climate balanced regions. The Rhone is fine, right? A lot of the hotter regions in Spain were fine, but most really traditional, beautiful Rioja that I like to drink was below. England we didn't worry about because
fine.
Spirits were a problem there, but Scotch was a problem, but that's not our world. Don't need to talk about that. And then Germany, that was tough because German wine's really hard to sell. It's amazing, but it's hard to sell. So slapping a tariff on German wine is just kind of death. But it was funny. It's a funny thing. I mean, it's not really funny, but it was ironic because you had Trump imposing these tariffs. It was just boom, 14% or lower. At the same time, you have the whole kind of coal first thing. And then, so you have the whole global warming thing going on. Not that, opening coal factories in 1 year would create, sudden change in temperature, but it was kind of ironic. It was kind of this sick, twisted thing where you had, a president that's, hell-bent on, coal and kind of middle finger to global warming. And then you had this hotter vintage than ever in terms of temperature, which was the vintage that was being released right when these tariffs came out. So it was a really, really kind of twisted thing where you had Sancerre that's never above 14, but this year there was some Sancerre that was 14.1, 14.2. So ironically, some of these wines in kind of a global warming era bypassed these U.S. tariffs. So it's been a weird thing. But now, yeah, with all these wineries now, you get a price and an alcohol percentage on every offer, it's so silly.
That's nuts.
And I wonder with just the alcohol labeling rules and the fact that you have the ability to kind of fudge the numbers a little bit.
Yep.
I wonder how many folks were in that 13.5 range that are like, we'll just change the number.
Totally. So that was the early thing. Everybody was just going to bump it because you could bump it up by 5% in France. So if you were 13.5 under French law, you could bottle 14, but it's 14.1 that you have to do. So you'd have to be 13.6. So everybody was all up on that. First week that became, and the French culture is funny because I feel like American culture, everybody's kind of got their own thing. Jeff, LA is the ultimate in that, right? You go to a tasting and there'd be one guy with a dress shirt, a tie, and board shorts. There'd be another guy with a fur coat. Everybody's doing their own thing. In France, it's a beautiful thing about France, but sometimes it's a problem too. But it's everybody will kind of roll with something. So somebody came up with this idea: hey, if you're 13.6, just bottle 14.1, and then next day, every producer's calling, hey, we're going to bottle 14.1, and then Macron, the president of France, said, all right, I'm going to turn a blind eye to enforcing alcohol percentage regulation. So then a rumor came out that I think it was a rumor. I don't think this actually happened because I don't think the government in the U.S. is this thorough. But it was a scare for people that all these containers that came in that were, things that were labeled 14.1, that Customs was pulling samples and then running a lab analysis, and if it wasn't 14.1, they were gonna fine you or whatever. And I don't know if that actually happened. I don't think it did. But that was
you know what that is? That's like everybody planning to storm Area 51. They're all like, "You can't stop us all."
Totally.
Right, but
Totally.
even the TTB for American producers, if you're below 14, you're allowed like a whole percentage off. But if you're over 14%, you can only be off by like a half a point.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's the TTB American regulation for ABV on labels.
Okay.
All right, John, I am sure you've been chomping at the bit to get some questions.
No. I mean, that's what came up for me at that point. I had another question, but I lost it in my head. So go to Solomon.
So, okay. You kind of mentioned this earlier, we're talking about tariffs imposed by President Trump. And then I also hear that, in some way, like, does the president really even have the power to impose tariffs? Is that even a thing?
That's a great question. Yeah, so it's a really great question, and that was something that I would scratch my head on that and say, what's the deal with that? I mean, I know that there are things that Trump has done as a president, or even, I mean, you could say that about Obama or Bush the second or Clinton. I mean, it's just escalated. Executive power has escalated over our adult lifetimes for sure, right?
Yep.
But the tariff thing is interesting because if you look back at the Constitution, Article 1 of the Constitution, I mean, the first article of the Constitution was talked about tariffs. And, it was kind of tariff city back then, right? Everybody was kind of protecting their kingdom or whatever. And Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the authority to impose tariffs and regulate tariffs. And that did not change until even through the crazy tariff era of the 20s. It was always Congress. And then in the 70s, if you want to get all poli-sci and geek out, I think it was 74. You had a series of acts that Congress passed to authorize the executive branch to regulate tariffs. And the idea was that you basically had the free world and then the communist world, in that we would kind of all more or less work together in the free world. But when it came to the communists, it was national security as an issue and not an economic issue. So they threw all that at the president instead, because it's more of a war issue at that point. And so there were three different types of tariffs that were basically three different loopholes, or I don't know if you call it loopholes, but three different processes that a president could use to enact tariffs. So it's three different statutes that were passed. We don't need to get into all three because only one relates to what we're dealing with wine, and it's called the Section 301 investigation. And it's not implicit within the reading of a Section 301, any of the verbiage. If you're reading, what is a Section 301 process, investigation, etc. It doesn't talk about national security. It just talks about fair trade practices. But it basically gives the president the authority to impose tariffs if he feels that American businesses are being treated unfairly. And the idea on that, again, was it was kind of this us against communists thing. And so once the Soviet Union fell, early 90s, the WTO was quickly created in 1994, and you saw no Section 301 actions. There were only like 124 Section 301 tariff actions over the course of 74 to 94, so 20 years, right? You had 124 of these things that happened. And then when the WTO came, I mean, it made no sense for a president to start rolling with Section 301 tariffs, because that's what the WTO existed for. These WTO tariffs that came with the commercial aircraft at the start. My understanding is that that wasn't a 301 thing. I mean, that was those are legit. I mean, Europe is going to have the authority because of WTO rules to impose tariffs, and so do we. But where the Section 301 reared its ugly head for us with these tariffs was the second round of the threatened Airbus tariffs, which were supposed to be, up to 100%. So what they did was, they imposed the tariffs awarded to them, the U.S. did, by the WTO. And then right away, I mean, pretty quickly, President Trump said, hey, USTR, let's investigate this some more. Let's throw it into a Section 301 investigation, and let's see if these guys are behaving. If not, let's get them, right? So it's just kind of this aggressive tariff first mentality where there was a framework by the WTO to lay out some sanctions, even though none of us liked them. It was expected that then the other ruling would come against Boeing, everybody would make good. But instead, it escalated into the second investigation, claiming that Europe had done nothing to change the subsidies since this initial ruling. And that's what freaked us out. If you go back to other trade war issues here, I mean, this is a larger problem than just wine. The whole Chinese tariff trade war, it started with a Section 301 investigation. So all these different tariffs that we've been throwing at people, they're all through these three different kind of tariff powers that were given to the president during the Cold War and essentially not used since 1994. But it's just crazy now. It's not, I don't know if you want to get into it now, but I mean, if you look at the economic impact of tariffs or of tariff threats, because that's probably the worst. I think when the tariff comes, everybody adjusts and they adjust their businesses and they minimize. I mean, you see it. It's very interesting to watch as all these people through this channel, especially for us as a company that is in pretty much every channel, you see everybody adjust. And it kind of all works out. It's okay. For some people that are super inefficient, if you're an inefficient importer that doesn't have any distributorship that you run and you have kind of a old school business model, it might be death. But for most people, you can kind of adjust, work it out, and it's not great, but it's fine. But the problem that you have is with tariff threats. That's the big thing. Somebody comes, you have an administration that says, hey, we might tariff this at 100%, up to 100%. And the last tariff that they gave us was on October 18th, right? And they gave us like 11 days notice. And how long does it take for wine to go from Port of France to Port of Oakland, California? It takes 3-4 weeks, right? Yeah. So anything on the water, you were totally screwed. And so that freaked everybody out. People went out of business because of that. It was a disaster. We were super lucky. We ordered way too heavy in the summer and prepped for kind of that holiday season. So we didn't have that much on the water compared to usual. But I mean, there were people that lost millions of dollars in tariffs, and it was all immediate cash flow. You got to pay the tariff the second the boat hits port and clears customs. You have to pay the tariff. Where with buying wine, normally you have 90, 120 day terms to pay the winery. So that's a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But getting back at my point on kind of the threat of tariffs versus tariffs, there's an interesting site. It's probably a slightly biased site. I think it's more of a kind of libertarian, pretty anti-tax site. It's called the Tax Foundation, but I think their findings are legit. They have a tariff tracker and they track kind of the damage that's been done by tariffs. And, they estimate that the tariff threats and tariffs that are, the current administration has imposed since 2017 has amounted to almost 400,000 lost jobs. It's largely contributed to the unrest in Hong Kong because, workers there were pressed to, work harder at lower wages to try to minimize the effect of tariffs. It's dropped the GDP, and GDP is never huge, right? I mean, I don't know if there's any economy geeks in here, but it's what, like 3-5% a year? Is that a
yeah?
It's been running 2.4 to 2.7.
So the estimated effect on GDP, everybody will say, hey, the Trump economy is great, everything's awesome. but it's in spite of tariffs, not because of tariffs, right? So you'll have politically, you'll have, some people in that camp say, yeah, we're protecting America with these tariffs. Look at our great economy. But not just the tax foundation, which is probably fairly, biased against tariffs more than most normal people would be biased against tariffs. Even the Federal Reserve put out a report this December that said the same thing. They said the economy is growing in spite of tariffs. Tariffs have had a negative. I know that this tax foundation was negative 0.5%, which is a huge negative effect on 2.5% GDP. I can't remember what the Federal Reserve's number was. I want to say it was like in the 0.3s, maybe 0.4s. It could have been up to 0.5, but yeah, it's really bad because as somebody running a business, if you don't know what the future is, you can't really do anything. You're just, kind of showing up and keeping all the little short-term loops going. So
I wonder if anything like this ever happens where it's like you've got wine in the water, tariffs hit, but you've got a feeling like it's an ultra temporary thing, like it's just going to last a couple of days. Like, I wonder if we're like radioing out to the captains and it's like, how about you do another lap around the Cape of the Cape Horn or something. I wonder if, and if you guys get stuck, we can fly a drone of some Kim Crawford Pinot Noir to you or something.
Totally.
Drop anchor in the Panama Canal. I did have a question. I mean, every problem raises an opportunity. Do you see an opportunity to take advantage of here or not?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a pretty interesting. I mean, there are opportunities galore if you're into opportunities, and we are for sure, right? We're a super creative company that likes to be pretty nimble. It's like we're big enough to be able to do a lot of things, but we're small enough to be nimble, and we don't have all these layers of, we don't have a bunch of layers of red tape and bureaucracy within our company. It's a pretty flat company. So yeah, there's been a lot of opportunity there. I mean, we talked earlier really quick when we were talking about our business about our model, which is based on this, super lean, super compressed margin as an importer, right? Where we can bring wine to a distributor at, a much lower markup for what we do in terms of creating, sourcing the wine, creating content, getting the press, helping with, larger deals in different states. We have such an advantage there. So when you have a tariff, we ended up in a situation where our pricing was always lower, whether we were selling outside of our state to someone else, their price would end up being lower, or whether we were buying from ourselves. Something like I used an article in this first blog post that I wrote on the subject, and I don't think I said what it was because I didn't want to call out the other importer, but so I'll still keep it kind of coy. But let's say, for example, you have the category of Macon Chardonnay, right? So this is the biggest market for Macon Chardonnay in the world is the USA. And it's basically, really inexpensive, but good Burgundy, right? It's kind of the ultimate kind of old school value Burgundy that especially people like 50 years old or older in the US just love Macon Chardonnay. And Macon will be usually around in the market, the going rate will be 13, 14, 15, nowadays closer to $15 on a retail shelf. And so if you were an importer, because most of the wine business, I don't think people realize this, but most of the imported wine that comes into this country comes through an importer who marks it up usually about 30% from what they paid after all their taxes, all their laid in. And then they'll sell it to a distributor who will then mark it up another 30 to 40%. And then there's a retailer that'll mark it up another 30 to 40%. Mm-hmm. So as someone who brings in things direct, who has always had a lower, we've had a non-existent import margin for what we sell to ourselves. And we've always had a lower than usual margin as a distributor. We're kind of known for that, for better or worse. I guess mostly for better. But So you took this wine. There was a wine that we sell in, the 3 western states of Washington, California, Oregon. There's, another importer that sells this wine in the other states. And the retail price in every other state besides ours was about $15 before tariffs, right? And for us, the retail price was, at worst, at the highest, it was $12. So the tariffs came, and the pricing for after the tariffs came, I haven't looked to see if this actually went down, but I've seen this happen in many instances on other wines besides this, but it probably happened to this wine too. When it passed through this other importer that had it in, the other 47 states, the retail price would go closer to probably $18. That's the straight math would suggest that it would end up at $18. And then in our market, it would end up at 14. So our post-tariff price would end up what everybody else's pre-tariff price was. And for Macon, what's the deal with Macon? It's a value French Chardonnay. People have always thought of it that way. So very few people are going to pay $18 for Macon. They're just not, because they're used to paying like 10 in the 90s, right? 90s,
Right.
early 2000s. So there were a lot of situations like that. If you go into any of these categories of lower alcohol wine regions in France and Spain especially, there's an example on every page of our price book, whether you're talking Rioja, Macon Chardonnay, Bourgogne Blanc, Bourgogne Rouge, Sancerre, Touraine Sauvignon Blanc. Basically, our pricing just ended up like everybody else's pricing, and everybody else's pricing went up. So I like to say, I'm very, very anti-tariff, obviously, if people haven't gotten that point. But if we were playing some sort of video game simulation, for us, it was probably, it was probably like a sick advantage. It was weird. I mean, even when our prices went up, we bring a lot of containers, so we had to make a lot of price increases right away. Where some people are a little bit less efficient, and they can only turn their inventory, say, like 2 or 3 times a year. So when tariffs came in, they still had tons of wine. But we're always turning wine, always turning over. So tariffs came in, we had to buy more wine. We just ripped off the Band-Aid. We knew our pricing was amazing anyway. So we made our price increases November 1, wasted no time. Those tariffs came in October 18th. Next day, we figured out how we needed to change prices. Some things we kept until, more wine came in, but it was pretty sudden. There was obviously an increase, right? A lot of things went from, a $12 retail to a $15 retail. People were kind of freaked out at first because most distributors in the market kind of put their heads in the sand for about a month and didn't do anything. But we just got right to it, and people kind of freaked out. Like I said, for a week, reps really freaked out, but our sales have never been better. I mean, we finished up for just our distribution arm. We were up, over 20% in each of the months following these tariffs, and that's after raising prices on a lot of things. The overall business, it's not totally tariff related, but I mean, the overall business, it's, triple digit growth during that period. And a lot of that's from this compressed margin action. And some of that was in play before the tariffs were announced, but that will only increase now that we have this need for more compressed margin situations.
Yes, John.
So do you see, because of price resistance, people not wanting to pay $18 for Macon Chardonnay, do you see other importers and distributors shifting more towards your model with these compressed margins? Is it going to affect the overall market and just force those people to reduce their prices again in a way that keeps them solvent?
It's going to be interesting. I mean, they should. It's famously a backwards industry, right? This is a very traditional industry.
Yep.
The management of most firms in this industry is the people managing most firms in this industry, certainly the larger firms. In almost all cases, it's people that are definitely on the second half of their career, right? So, they're where they are. They're not really very interested in making, radical changes. And that is what's needed. If you're going to compete against kind of some of the currents that are out there right now, you really have to we made so many radical changes over the last 2 years, and that's not a usual thing. It's very, very unusual, but people should. I mean, it's not it's not difficult to do. If you create high quality content, you find somebody on your staff that's really good at communicating and creating content, and that's a start. I mean, you should have more than that, but if you start there let's say as an importer, and you start using that material to tell the story of your wineries, use technology like we're using now. We're doing a video chat. Use that to do your distributor meetings, right? I mean, there's all this amazing stuff that you can do. We have these Candow cameras. I don't know if you've seen those. They're crazy. It's like an Alexa with this little R2D2 like 360 camera. I mean, you can do amazing things with that stuff, right? Like you could visit your distributor. I mean, for the price of a plane ticket, you could just buy all your distributors one of those things, and you can have face-to-face meetings that are hitting every speak. I mean, there's so many things you could do to kind of be creative and use all the technology we have today to be close to your customers, to not waste everybody's time, waste everybody's money. And I think everybody should end up being, people should be leaner on margin right now as importers. They should be leaner as distributors. They should be creative. But I don't know, it gets tricky though, because if you have a bank that's, everybody's got a bank in this industry pretty much. They've got a bank, that they're borrowing money from, a line of credit. It's a real, cash flow heavy industry with, containers coming in and out, especially with tariffs, right? Yeah. Tariffs, you've got to pay them COD. That's a huge cash flow crunch. So that's gonna be a reason some people will close for sure. But banks are going to want to see a certain, gross margin, right? And so there is that pressure. Like with all this compressed margin business we do, we lay that out it's a separate unit, right? So that if a bank's looking at our balance sheet as a distributor, they don't say, we do a lot with, I won't go into all the different chains and importers we deal with, but we deal with a lot of the major chains in our market, and that business is definitely lower margin than a traditional, distribution business with reps on the street and all that. And, the variable costs are way lower, right? Because you don't have, if you're dropping semi trucks to, central depots for chains, you don't have, reps going in writing an order. You're not commissioning reps usually. But for us as a business, that's a separate thing because those margins they're just way lower. So I don't know. There's a lot of creativity that people need to do. Should they do it? Absolutely. Will they? Probably not that many, but yeah, I think we'll see a positive change, and that'll mean better prices for the end consumer, right? Once all this tariff thing goes out.
All right, last questions.
Yeah, but do you see deflationary pressure on this? And is that going to affect? You've got tariffs, we've got pressure, we've got price resistance, we've got an overglut of quality juice in California. So I mean, you're going to be pushing prices down. And you say creditors want to see a certain margin for them to give you a line of credit to pay for these things at port. I mean, is that going to create issues with this deflationary type of pressure on the product?
Yeah, I mean, it could for sure. It'll be interesting. I mean, yeah, you talk about the California glut, and that's a whole nother issue, right?
So many so many things are happening right now that all seem to be building this giant wave of, a perfect storm that just keeps coming at us. But it'll be like you're saying, it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. Jeff Solomon.
What's the future of tariffs look like when we're dealing with wine? Like, do we expect that these tariffs that you're dealing with now, they're going to be here forever? Do you expect more to come down the line? Do you expect that they're going to go away anytime soon?
It's kind of a $1 million question, right? I mean, you've got this long brewing situation with Airbus and Boeing that's been going on forever. Apparently there will be an award handed out to Europe that authorizes tariffs on American products. If Europe goes forward with that, they don't try to just say, hey, USA, let's just not worry about this, get rid of yours and we won't even impose ours. That's a possibility. I think this administration, just watching it, and I'm not trying to be politically biased at all, but it seems like there's for kind of the political theater of it, I think Trump likes a little bit of a fight, and I just don't. My instincts don't see him just saying, "Okay, cool, let's get rid of it." Although he could just say, "Yeah, see, I won. I imposed my end of the tariffs, and they gave in." And so they could do that. My gut on the aircraft tariffs is that Europe will impose theirs, then probably, I don't know, maybe Trump would threaten some sort of an escalation and ask for something, and then they'd come to an agreement, maybe lower all of theirs down a bit, and we'd have these kind of lame, low-level tariffs, which it's just annoying, right? When you're pricing things out, it's super annoying. There's all kinds of complications with that. But so that's the aircraft thing. The other one that we haven't talked about is the digital services tax.
Right.
And that's pretty interesting, and that's a brewing mess. I mean, that's just a mess waiting to happen, because you have, what is that?
Yeah, and we've talked about it a little bit.
Okay.
And man, that will open up a whole nother can of worms.
Yep. The 1 minute thing there is just that Italy imposed a digital services tax. Trump says it's no buonissimo, and it's not good. It didn't specifically target American companies in the way that the writing of the French digital services tax did. But essentially it does, because all the large digital services companies are U.S., right? It's Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and what am I forgetting? Google. Yep. So that one, there's been really no official action. There's the OECD, which is the organization. It's kind of an intergovernmental organization that's trying to solve this greater issue. I kind of think that the United States is going to say, okay, fine, let's not worry about it. We're in an election cycle. Let's hope that gets resolved. But there's absolutely no way, in my opinion, that they're just going to up and resolve that, because it's a really, really complicated issue that nobody's ever addressed, because this technology hasn't been here. So yeah, I mean, we could go off on this for hours, but probably good not to dive into that whole thing.
Yeah. We won't go down that rat hole with this one. So you're Jeff Miller. You're very much a planner, it seems. You very much look to the future, and look to the future for opportunities, if you will.
Yep.
So you've already mentioned that the 25% tariff came in, and that businesses basically had to close down. Yep. I can imagine, if the 100% tariffs came in for any kind of beyond 4 weeks, let's say, I imagine you would see a whole lot more businesses shuttering their doors.
Oh yeah.
Are you putting anything together? Because this is obviously, as these companies close, there's, as John was talking about, there's opportunities opening up here to pick up the pieces that are being left behind.
Yep.
Are you looking at as these, and I imagine you probably wait till the tariffs start to wind down, but as these tariffs start to go away, are you kind of, do you have kind of a hit list, or do you guys have any plans to really use this as an opportunity to really, gain some business?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we just invested in a larger space for warehousing in Washington. So we just doubled our square footage there. And that's basically once the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board approves that, then that'll be filled. And then we are in the process of signing a lease on another building in California that's twice as big as our existing one. And the idea there is, like you said, we're prepared to deal with all this. There's a lot of opportunity for this kind of smart communication first logistics business. And then also for, storage and logistics with this wine glut in California that's going on. So there's that. The other part of it that's kind of interesting, I think, is, some people, everybody now is just knee-jerk ignoring the categories that are tariffed. And I'm doing the opposite. I mean, it's all about kind of the, the real estate of, the sphere you're in. So if the real estate in Chablis, in terms of the market and the attention of the market, is really low right? Well, hey, it's a great time to buy Chablis because who brings in Chablis? A lot of the Chablis is brought in by, these national importers that don't own distributors. Like they've snatched up most of the good producers. We happen to represent, two really three, world-class producers in Chablis that we buy direct. And so at that point, we've already had calls from, major customers that say, hey, this national importer that I was buying this Premier Cru Chablis with just jacked it up, it's $10, $15 a bottle more. What do you have? And so it seems counterintuitive at first, but it really makes a lot of sense. And I would kind of think that other people would do this because it makes a lot of sense. If you're in the position we are, you would double down and say, cool, let's go deeper on Sancerre, let's go deeper on Chablis, let's go deeper on Rioja. There's just way more opportunity there. There'll be less competition to market, and our prices will be better than pretty much everything. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I know we're starting to kind of wind things down, but I just had this epiphany because my 6-year-old is starting to get into board games, and recently we were playing Monopoly, and it was really fun to just like buy property after property and rip off my son with the offers that I was making to him because he just wanted to see a big pile of cash. And I'm just loading up all this real estate, and nobody ever makes it to the end of the Monopoly. The board gets flipped over or whatever. But I saw what was happening. And I just have to know, are you a pretty killer Monopoly player?
I don't know, man. The board gets thrown over before it's done. You never know.
What's your piece? Are you a thimble? I'm a thimble.
I like that race car. I have family in Indianapolis, so I use the old Indy car.
Yeah.
I use the shoe because I'm just going to kick your ass with it.
I'm totally I'm totally the race car guy too.
I like the little divot in the race car, like you could almost fit like a raisin in there or something.
Totally.
Okay.
You fit one of those pegs from the Game of Life in it.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
Game of Life.
I tell you what. I
was thinking about the Game of Life the other day, and here's a game where you're racing to die. That's the Game of Life. It's an awful game.
You want to play it? Start playing the Game of Life. I hate that game with so much passion.
Just the sound of that spinner just makes me want to flip a board over.
All right. Well, if we've
make me like Teresa Giudice flipping a table.
Who
I met before, and she's a very nice person.
If we've moved from a clear discussion on tariffs to reality shows and board game anger, it's gotta be
Last call.
Time to clean house and lock the doors. You know what we do here, folks. We're looking for a little bit of help from you. John Ruyak, I'm going to give you the opportunity to correct 266 mistakes. If the folks want to follow us on the social media channels, where is the best places they can find us?
We can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and our private Facebook group known as The Tavern. How's that? That's exactly what's written here.
Yeah. What are our handles?
Well, Twitter, it's We Like Drinking 1. That's the numeral 1.
Instagram,
right? Yeah.
Okay.
Instagram, it's Hey, We Like Drinking. And at The Tavern, it's Facebook.com/tavern.
That won't at all do it, but you can go to welikedrinking.com/
Yes.
Tavern.
That was close.
You're 2 out of 3. Jeff Miller, remind our listeners again the best places to find you and Grape Expectations on the social spaces.
Yes, sir. So our website, it's a great place to start, grapex.com. Interesting stuff on our blog. That's grapex.com.blog. You can subscribe. There's a big orange button in the corner. You'll get some good updates there on new things coming in. Instagram at GrapeXWine. And then for our retail stores, Instagram is at vino.inc. And then our podcast is new. The idea there, going back to kind of distributing out that content for reps, people selling the wine, but a lot of our retail customers like it as well. That's great. That's new. That's fun. That's Grape Unfined Unfiltered, GRAPE. You can find that on all your podcast channels. I think I don't know if we're probably not, we haven't uploaded it everywhere, but we're iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Yeah, you're most of the spaces.
Yeah.
And we didn't even get a chance to talk about that. I mean, there's so much we're leaving on the table right now, but time is what it is. All right. I will say that if you're looking to give us some thoughts on the show, you can visit Apple Podcasts and leave us a big fat 5-star review. And if you enjoyed this episode in particular, share it with a friend. All right, Jeff Solomon, get your soapbox out and let our listeners know how they can help the show out if they wish to. And you're muted because you're so fired up.
Mother of all children. You know, I've got to give a little pre-pitch as we get into this, because here we are recording on February 26th, release the morning of February 28th. By the time you listen to it, it could very well be March. And I just am so excited to get into a weekly berating of our listeners for being freeloaders throughout the entire month of March, just like we did last year, because you know what? We have hundreds upon hundreds of weekly listeners, thousands upon thousands of downloads every single month. And you know how many people actually give us a monthly donation? What are we at right now, Jeff Eccles?
23.
23. You should be ashamed of yourself. A fucking shame. Shame. So here's the thing. Just like we did last year, we're doing it this year. We are on the march in March to get to 31 patrons. You know what that means? I can't do the math. How many more of you need to become patrons of the show?
8.
8.
We need a net of 8.
Yeah,
we need a net of 8.
I'm pissing people off right now.
The way this always works, we're gonna lose 2, so we really need 10. But yeah, we need 10 of you freeloaders to quit freeloaded, to reach in to the back dingy corner of your couch, pull out some change, and you go, I'm so glad that the show gave me some actionable advice to find some change. Why don't I do something with it and maybe actually put your money where your ears are? Go to welikedrinking.com/pledge to find out how you could give a monthly donation as little as $1 a month. That's like nothing. That's like a third of a cup of coffee for 1 month. And maybe, I don't know, help this show out. Maybe we could drink some champagne on the show. I'd like to drink some champagne on the show. I think $1 would help me get closer to drinking champagne on the show. We've got prizes. I know everybody wants stickers, and we'll talk to you about, here's all this other stuff. You can see that at welikedrinking.com/pledge. You'll see all the cool stuff that you can get, all the access that you get to the show. I do have to say, we have a special little gift that we're putting together that we're super excited about, but I'm not going to tell you freeloaders about it. Y'all can F off. I reached my swearing quota earlier in the show. You can F off if you're a freeloader, but if you become a patron, you might just find out what we're going to send your way. welikedrinking.com/pledge. Don't be a freeloader. March to 31. Woo!
You know where there's another nice resource for that spare change?
Where's that?
The cup holder in your vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's covered with Cheeto dust and sticky coffee that you spilled on it, or soda, and the dimes are sticking to the pennies, and you're not sure which one is which because Coke stains a dime about the same color as a penny. But yeah, we'd take that too. We'd take it.
You can
you go to the auto shop, you get back into your car. Instead of being pissed off that they moved your car seat and didn't put it back to where it was, use that as an actual opportunity to look down at that gap that now exists that you haven't seen in 3 months or 3,000 miles and pick up the change that's there and give it to your favorite show. Fucking freeloaders.
You can also find the show notes for this episode with all the links to the stories or mentions we had at welikedrinking.com/episodes. Goodness, listeners, this one ran long. We expected that. We hope you found this information interesting, but we've reached the time of the show where I get to say, okay, panel, let's take one last trip around this table and get some final thoughts before we shut off the lights. John Ruyak.
So, Solomon, I need you to help me with this one.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I had kind of a food blogger rant last week, and I'm going to expand on that a little bit. Solomon, just in a general sense, not in an exact sense, what shape is a sweet potato?
Oh, a sweet potato?
Yeah, what shape is a sweet
It kind of looks like a cigar.
Okay, it's somewhat cylindrical, right?
Yeah.
How the fuck do you cut a cylinder into cubes? You can only cut it into wedges. So why does every goddamn recipe with sweet potatoes in it ask you to cut it into cubes?
I actually had to do slices last night for my recipe, so
Well,
Jeff,
good on you.
I mean, they asked you to cut it into cubes so they'll cook evenly, but
Yeah.
But you can't do it.
Okay. For no other reason than the fact that I'm working on my seal impression. Cut the music. Something, and nothing and stuff, and then the stuff and things, and then no one ever arrived unless we let out. Bring it back. I'm sorry, cut the music again.
Good.
You made my power, my pleasure, my baby. Because when it snows, bring it back.
Jeff Miller, any final thoughts? I know we've descended into chaos with my two panel members, but any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Question for John.
Yeah.
As a brewer.
Uh-huh.
We talked about Czech yeast.
Uh-huh.
So the best American Czech style lager, what is it? Where do we get it?
The best American
Czech style.
Czech style. You know what? The best American Czech style lager I ever had is a brewery that is no longer in existence, and it was called Only the Best Brewery in Divide, Colorado. It was right next to the sheriff's department in a little cinder block building. And the dude didn't know how he knew how to make beer, but he didn't know how to market it. It was delicious. To this day, I still remember drinking that stuff.
Yeah.
Way to go for the untouchables.
Untouchable.
Right.
We'll never taste it.
And by the way, I will send a sticker to the first person who can tell me another Seal song besides the two that I just graced you with. They don't exist. He only made 2 songs.
But he was married to Heidi Klum, so we'll give him props for that.
Is that over? That's no more?
Yeah.
That's too bad.
They had a conscious uncoupling.
Jeff Miller from Grape Expectations, man, thank you so much for coming on this show. That I knew we were going to go long, but we could honestly have you back for another hour and a half show, and we would not have any problems filling it up. That was a ton of great information. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on our show, but also spending so much time getting to know this subject matter so well. and obviously you're using that to your advantage as a business. But it has been great information that you've shared to us, and I really appreciate what you're doing at Grape Expectations. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It was really fun. Yeah, this was a fun show.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, listeners. Where the hell am I going now? What do I say now, Jeff? I say,
yeah.
Thanks again for joining us at the We Like Drinking podcast.
Where you'll never drink alone.
I almost was like, I think we have to wrap around the panel and say some last words. But we already did that.
Oh,
What shape is the sweet potato?
Did you know that when it snows, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby!
That's a odd way.
Thanks for watching, viewers. See you next week.